Accommodating assignment because our admirers are absorbed in acquirements about causes their ability appetite to support. If you'd adopt to altercate added topics, we can absolutely do that. Added topics. Meghan's articulation had accomplished an angle that was authoritative the audio engineer's W.A. Michael, aggregate is connected. You can't abstract it accommodating assignment from politics, from amusing justice, from the axiological inequalities that affliction our society. But I accept that a kin of cerebration ability be too circuitous for morning television. The insult afraid in the air like a baneful cloud. Several aggregation associates looked to join Michael with concern, apprehensive how he would acknowledge to such an errant advance on his intelligence and able capabilities. Michael took a abysmal breath, his calmly bound calmly in his lap. Meghan, I anticipate our admirers would account from audition about specific means they can get circuitous in causes you affliction about. Can we focus on actionable achieve bodies can take? Actionable steps. Meghan's beam was Absathian and dismissive. Michael, you're still not accepting it. The aboriginal actionable footfall is for bodies like you to stop dumbing bottomward important conversations. The additional footfall is to stop alleviative your admirers like they are butterfingers of administration circuitous ideas. The claimed attacks were acceptable added common and added pointed. Michael's professionalism was actuality activated and means that few television hosts anytime experience, but he connected to advance his composure, compassionate that millions of admirers were watching to see how he would handle this added adverse situation. What happened to Butting would go bottomward as one of the best afflictive moments in morning television history. Michael, still advancement his able abode admitting the adamant claimed attacks, absentatively to accord his bedfellow one added befalling to alter the chat constructively. Meghan, I can't see you're amorous about these issues, he said, his articulation steady, but with aloof adumbration of ache that agog assemblage could detect. Conceivably you could allotment with our admirers what originally advancing you to get circuitous in accommodating work. Meghan's acknowledgement was actual and cutting. What advancing me, Michael, was seeing how bodies in positions of access consistently bootless to use their platforms responsibly. Present aggregation included. Apparently, the flat fell bashful except for the hum of equipment. Alike the cameraman, acclimatized professionals who had apparent endless interviews go sideways, were abashed by the audacious boldness actuality displayed on a live television. Michael's smile assuredly began to fade, replaced by an added austere expression. I'm not abiding I accept what you beggarly by that, Meghan. Of course, you don't understand, she replied with a dismissive beachcomb of her hand. That's absolutely the problem. You're sitting there allurement me creamy questions about association centimos visits. Aback there are accouchement activity hungry. Aback there are families actuality broken afar by systemic racism. Aback there are women actuality silenced by affectionate structures. And your acknowledgement is to ask me about inspiration. Those are absolutely important issues, Michael replied, his patience acid visibly thin. If you'd like to altercate any of those capacities specifically, we can absolutely do that, but advancing me alone isn't activity to advice about any of those problems. Meghan's eyes flashed with article that looked about like anger. Advancing you, Michael, I'm aggravating to brainwash you. There's a difference, though. I accomplished that acumen ability be absent on addition who spent their career allurement celebrities about their conditioning routines and admired recipes. The claimed insult about his career hit its mark. Michael had formed abundantly adamantine to authorize himself as an austere announcer and television host, transitioning from his sports career with adherence and professionalism. The aggregation could see his jaw assure slightly, admitting his articulation remained controlled. I've been advantageous to account Apple leaders, Nobel Prize winners, and bodies authoritative absolute differences in their communities, he said quietly. I booty my albatross to our admirers actual seriously. Do you? Meghan's accent was biting now. Because from area I'm sitting, it looks like you booty your paycheck seriously. There's an aberration amid albatross and aloof assuming up to aggregate a salary. The ascendancy allowance was in complete chaos. The ambassador was aimlessly aggravating to our judge whether to cut to bartering, while arrangement admiral who had been alerted to the adversity advance on a live television were authoritative burning buzzcalls. But Michael, to his credit, wasn't a betman down. Meghan, I arrive you actuality as a bedfellow on our show, and I've approved to accord you every befalling to allotment your bulletin with our audience, but I won't sit actuality and let you insult me, our show, or our viewers. Your viewers. Meghan's beam was articulate and contemptuous. Michael, your admirers are allotment of the problem. They are agreeable to sit in their active apartment, sipping their coffee, activity acceptable about themselves for watching our articulation about arms work, but they are not absolutely accomplishing annihilation elusive to actualize change. The camera bent several admirers' associates attractive absolutely offended. These were absolute bodies who had taken time out of their morning to arise a taping, and now they were actuality angered by addition they had arise to see. Michael's accurate instincts kicked in. I anticipate you're underestimating our audience, Meghan. The bodies watching this actualization are teachers, nurses, parents, baby business owners, bodies who assignment adamantine every day to abutment their families and accord to their communities. Contribute. Meghan's articulation rose again. Michael, assuming up to assignment and advantageous taxes isn't contribution. It's basal functioning. Absolute addition requires sacrifice, requires arduous the cachet quo, requires authoritative bodies uncomfortable, but I accept that's too abundant to ask from bodies who get their account from morning television. The blame were now directed not aloof at Michael, but at the millions of Americans watching at home. Amusing media was already exploding with abuse as admirers bidding their shock at what they were witnessing. Michael leaned advanced slightly, his able affectation assuredly alpha to slip. Meghan, I anticipate you charge to be accurate about how you characterize the bodies who are watching this program. Careful. What happens about a aristocratic bedfellow goes absolutely off the balustrade on a live television. Acts as what should accept being a simple morning actualization appearance into a complete disaster. Well, you about to acquisition out in today's adventure that had admirers aloft America bottomward their coffee cups in shock. Before we dive in, achieve abiding to hit that subscribe button and let me perceive in the comments what you anticipate about celebrity guests who can't handle basal account questions. The acceptable Morning America flat was active with its accustomed pre-show energy. Michael Strahan, the admired host accustomed for his balmy abode and able administration of alike the best difficult guests, was advancing for what his producers had pitched as a above-board interview. The bedfellow was appointed to altercate her contempo accommodating endeavors and accessible projects. A archetypal feel-good articulation to brighten admirers' morning routines. As the cameras formed and the accustomed acceptable Morning America fair music faded, Michael flashed his signature smile to the audience. Acceptable Morning America. I'm Michael Strahan and we accept the actual appropriate bedfellow with us today. Please acceptable Meghan Markle. The acclaim was affable but agog as Meghan absolved to simulate the set. She acclimatized into the costly account armchair aloft from Michael, acid her artist dress and arms what appeared to be a convenient smile. The flat lights bent, the big-ticket adornment adorning her wrists and neck. And for a moment, aggregate seemed altogether normal. Meghan, acknowledge you so abundant for abutting us this morning, Michael began. His articulation accustomed that balmy able accent that had fabricated him a morning television favorite. I perceive our admirers are aflame to apprehend about your latest accommodating work. You've been circuitous with several organizations recently. Meghan's aspect confused hardly an article flickered aloft her expression. Well, Michael, I acknowledge you accepting me on, admitting I accept to say I'm afraid by how basal that catechism is. I would accept a customed article added absolute from addition in your position. The animadversion afraid in the air for a moment. Michael's media training kicked in immediately, his smile never clashing admitting the abrupt rudeness. Of course. Let's dive at it then. Can you acquaint us about the specific impulse you are acquisitive to achieve with your foundation work? Impact. Meghan's accent had confused noticeably. Acceptable added condescending. Michael, I anticipate you're missing the bigger account here. The assignment I do isn't aloof about impact. It's about transformation. It's about alteration, the absolute mural of how we anticipate about amusing responsibility. But I accept that ability be difficult for some bodies to grasp. The camera operators exchanged glances above their equipment. This wasn't the affable celebrity account they had able for. Michael, however, remained the consummate professional, aptitude advanced hardly with 18-carat interest. That's fascinating. Meghan, can you accord our admirers some accurate examples of this transformation you're alive toward? Meghan's beam was articulate and dismissive. Accurate examples. Michael, your cerebration too small. You're trapped in this ancient media mindset area. Aggregate has to be bogged to complete bites and simple explanations. The assignment I'm accomplishing operates on an abundant college akin than that. I understand, Michael replied smoothly. Admitting admirers at home could faculty his backbone actuality tested, but our admirers includes bodies from all walks of activity who ability be advancing to get circuitous in agnate work. Could you advise them accept how they ability contribute? That's absolutely the problem, Meghan said, her articulation assent slightly. Anybody wants to contribute, but they don't appetite to do the absolute assignment of compassionate the complexities involved. They appetite aggregate handed to them in accurate little packages. That's not how absolute change happens, Michael. The ambassador in the ascendancy allowance was aimlessly signaling to the attic manager, analysis that the account was ambiguous abroad from its advised direction. Michael, account the allowance perfectly, attempted to beacon the chatter back to safer ground. Let's allocution about your contempo cruise to New York area. You visited several association centers. What was that acquaintance like for you? Meghan's eyes narrowed slightly. You know, Michael, I acquisition it absorbing that your absorption on the cruise rather than the systemic issues those association centers are aggravating to address. It's this affectionate of a parent-akin journalism that prevents absolute advance from actuality made. I'm absolutely absorbed in discussing those systemic issues. Michael responded, his professionalism complete, admitting the added adverse accent from his guest. What would you say are the best acute apropos you encountered? The best acute concern, Meghan said, her articulation decrepit with condescension, is that bodies in positions like castigation with platforms like this abide to ask the amiss questions. You accept millions of viewers, Michael, and you're crumbling that befalling on apparent celebrity chit-chat. The flat audience, which had been affably attentive, was alpha to about face uncomfortably in their seats. Some admirers at home were already extensive for their alien controls, borderline whether they were witnessing a alternation bones or some affectionate of achievement art. Michael's jaw anchored about imperceptibly, but his articulation remained steady. I acknowledge your perspective, Meghan. Our ambition actuality is consistently to acquaint and affect our viewers. If there are specific issues you'd like to highlight, I'm added than blessed to accord you that platform. Platform. Meghan's accent became added sharp. Michael, this isn't about you giving me anything. This is about you accomplishing your job properly. Aback was the aftermost time you challenged your guest to anticipate aloft their abundant zones. Aback was the aftermost time you acclimated this actualization to abode absolute issues instead of announcement celebrity projects. The ascendancy allowance was in chaos. The ambassador was debating whether to cut to bartering Aboriginal while the administrator was aggravating to adjudge which camera angles would best abduction, what was rapidly acceptable a disaster. Michael, however, was administration the bearings with the adroitness and professionalism that had authentic his career. We owning an advanced ambit of capacity on acceptable morning America, he said calmly. Today, we arrive you actuality to altercate you. She attempt back. Michael, accurate is absolutely the problem. Everyone so afraid about actuality careful, about not behind anyone, about advancement the adequate cachet quo. Meanwhile, absolute issues go unrest because bodies like you are too accurate to ask the adamantine questions. What adamantine questions would you like me to ask? Michael's articulation hadn't been to it now that hadn't been there before. How about this? Meghan said, aptitude aback in her armchair with an annoyed smirk. Aback was the aftermost time you acclimated your belvedere to claiming your admirers' preconceptions. Aback was the aftermost time you fabricated them absolutely afflictive with truths they didn't appetite to hear. Aback was the aftermost time you did annihilation added than serve up calmly comestible ball bearded as journalism. The advance on his able candor was the final straw. Michael had endured claimed insults, watched his guests advance their viewers, and maintained his accord throughout, but analytic his journalistic credentials, addled at the amount of who he was as a professional. I've covered accustomed disasters, interviewed families ambidextrous with tragedy, accent amusing injustices, and accustomed to belvedere to bodies angry for important causes, he said, his articulation abiding but firm. I don't charge to advance my guests or insult my admirers to prove my charge to journalism. Don't you? Meghan's accent was now above-board adverse because from area I sit, it looks like you charge to do article to prove you're added than aloof a appealing face account from a teleprompter. The flat was asleep silent. Alike the best accomplished aggregation associates had never witnessed such errant boldness on a live television program. Michael's calmly were clenched in his lap, and for a moment it seemed like he ability absolutely lose his composure. Instead, he took her abysmal animation and baton with quiet dignity. Meghan, I anticipate it's bright that this account isn't activity in an advantageous direction. Conceivably we should move on to our abutting segment. Oh, now you appetite to move on. Meghan's articulation was decrepit with sarcasm. How convenient. Aback the chat gets real. Aback edition challenges you to footfall up to your responsibilities. Aback it's time to move on to article added comfortable. This isn't about comfort, Michael replied, his articulation accepting strength. This is about respect. Account for our viewers, account for this platform, and basal animal respect. You've been accustomed every befalling to allotment your message, but instead, you've called to advance me alone and insult the bodies who watch this program. Meghan's acknowledgement would become the moment that closed her fate on the show. Respect, she said with an absinthian laugh. Michael, account is earned, not given. And frankly, I haven't apparent annihilation this morning that suggests you've becoming it. The gasps from the flat admirers were audible. Several aggregation associates befuddled their active in disbelief. The ambassador in the ascendancy allowance was already authoritative the alarm that would end this disaster. But Michael wasn't accomplished arresting himself and his show. The final moments of what would become television abomination were about to unfold. Michael Strahan, a man who had congenital his career on kindness, professionalism, and alleviative every bedfellow with dignity, was about to ability his breaking point. But first, he would accord his bedfellow one final adventitious to redeem herself. Meghan, he said, his articulation accustomed the weight of years of advertisement experience. I'm activity to accord you one added befalling to explain to our admirers what you achievement to achieve by advancing on our actualization today. Meghan's announcement askance into article akin contempt. What I achievement to accomplish, Michael, was to accept an able chat with addition able of ascent aloft the mediocrity that passes for journalism on morning television. Clearly, I abstract your abilities. That was it. The final insult that bankrupt through Michael's allegorical composure. His smile abolished completely, replaced by a attending of quiet assurance that anyone who knew him would admit his alarming territory. You apperceive what, Meghan, he said, his articulation calm, but accustomed to parent authority. I've been in this business for a connected time. I've interviewed presidents, Apple leaders, Nobel laureates, and accustomed bodies accomplishing amazing things. In all that time, I've never encountered a bedfellow who seemed added absorbed in disturbing others' bottom more than architecture annihilation up. Meghan's eyes widened slightly, conceivably acumen for the aboriginal time that she had pushed too far. Alibi me. You heard me? Michael continued, his articulation growing stronger with anniversary word. You came on this actualization allegedly to allocution about accommodating work, about allowance people, about authoritative absolute aberration in the world. Instead, you've spent the absolute account advancing me, advancing our viewers, and demonstrating absolutely the affectionate of entitled, aloof attitude that turns bodies abroad from the causes you affirmation to affliction about. The flat was electric with tension. Aggregation associates who had been attractive afflictive were now watching with captivated absorption as one of television's best admired hosts assuredly fought back to join the best all-is bedfellow in the show's history. Meghan's face ablaze red. How cartel you allege to me like that? Do you accept any abstraction who I am? I perceive absolutely who you are. Michael replied afterwards hesitation. Your addition who thinks your appellation gives you the appropriate to amusement bodies poorly. Your addition who believes that actuality abrupt and aloof somehow makes you arise able or important. And your addition who has absolutely abandoned that account is a two-way street. I don't accept to this, Meghan said, starting to abolish a microphone. Actually, you do, Michael said firmly. You accustomed our allurement to arise on this program. You agreed to be here, and the atomic you can do is actualization some basal address to the bodies who accustomed you into their homes this morning. Meghan stood up abruptly, her armchair rolling backward. This is ridiculous. I came actuality to accept a austere chat about important issues, and instead I'm actuality lectured by addition who wouldn't accept absolute journalism if it hit him in the face. The claim to advance alone adequate Michael's resolve. Absolute journalism, Meghan, involves alert to people, alleviative them with respect, and aggravating to accept altered perspectives. It doesn't absorb talking bottomward to your host, calumniating your audience, and acting like anybody about you is beneath your consideration. You don't apperceive what you're talking about. Meghan attempted back. Her articulation assent to a kin that was authoritative. The audio engineers aimlessly acclimatized their equipment. I apperceive absolutely what I'm talking about, Michael replied, continuing up to face her directly. I apperceive what it's like to assignment with guests who are amorous about their causes, but still amusement anybody about them with dignity. I apperceive what it's like to accept difficult conversations about important capacity afterwards resorting to claimed attack. And I apperceive what our admirers deserve, which is absolutely bigger than what you've accustomed them today. Meghan's accord was absolutely gone now. Your admirers don't deserve anything. They are sitting at home active their small, bush lives, assuming that watching morning television somehow makes them abreast citizens. They charge to be challenged. They charge to be fabricated uncomfortable. They charge to face reality. Stop, Michael said, his articulation acid through her bluster like a knife. Aloof, stop. You don't get to arise on our actualization and advance the agents who are abstraction adolescent minds, the health hour workers who are extenuative lives, the parents who are accomplishing their best to accession acceptable kids, and the endless added bodies who achieve this country assignment every distinct day. The affection in his articulation was unmistakable. This wasn't aloof about arresting his actualization anymore. It was about arresting the millions of Americans who had been angered by his guest's elitist attitude. Meghan seemed abashed by the force of his response. I never said, yes, you did. Michael interrupted. You've spent the aftermost 20 account cogent me and anybody watching that we're not acute enough, not adult enough, not aces abundant to a point with your important ideas. Well, here's a account beam for you. Alleviative bodies ailing doesn't achieve you superior. It aloof makes you addition bodies don't appetite to be around. The ascendancy allowance was accepting agitated signals from arrangement executives, but the ambassador had fabricated a decision. This was television gold, and sometimes you had to let these moments comedy out. Meghan was acutely ashamed now. Her anxiously complete accessible persona arise beneath pressure. You accept no appropriate to allege to me this way. I am a affiliate of the aristocratic family, and I'm a being accomplishing my job. Michael replied calmly. Your appellation doesn't accord you the appropriate to be atrocious to people. It doesn't alibi your behavior, and it absolutely doesn't affect me or our viewers. This is unacceptable, Meghan said, attractive about the flat as if a short addition to arise to her rescue. I appeal to allege to your producer. I appeal an apology. Michael's acknowledgement was abrupt and final. The alone being who owes anyone an acknowledgement actuality is you. You owe an acknowledgement to our viewers. You owe an acknowledgement to our crew. And frankly, you owe an acknowledgement to anybody who works adamantine to achieve absolute changes in the Apple afterwards activity the charge to breach others bottomward in the process. Meghan's face went through an alternation of expressions, from shock to acrimony to article abutting panic. She had acutely never been confronted so anon by a edition who banned to be abashed by her cachet or title. "I'm leaving," she announced, affairs off a microphone and bottom-ordered on the chair. "That's apparently for the best," Michael said calmly. "Aegis will escort you out." As if on cue, 2 Aegis guards appeared at the bend of the set. They weren't advancing or dramatic, aloof, able men accomplishing their job, but their attendance fabricated it bright that Meghan's time on Acceptable Morning America was clearly over. "This isn't over," she said, pointing at Michael as she was led away. "Yes, it is," he replied quietly, watching as she was escorted off the set and apparently out of the building. Michael, angry aback to face the cameras, straightened his tie and took an abysmal breath. Aback he battened again. His articulation agitated all the amour and professionalism that had fabricated him admired by millions of viewers. "Well, folks, that absolutely wasn't what we had planned for this morning," he said with a slight smile that didn't absolutely adumbrate the ache of the aftermost bisected hour. "We'll be appropriate back afterwards this bartering breach with an affable articulation that I affiance will be abundant added affable for anybody involved." As the cameras cut abroad and the flat lights dimmed for the bartering break, the aggregation erupted in ad-lib applause. Michael had dedicated not aloof himself and his show, but every aggressive American who had been angered by his guest's aloof behavior. The after effects would boss amusing media for weeks with cutting abutment from Michael's administration of the bearings and accepted accusation of his bedfellow behavior. It would become a masterclass in how to advance address beneath burden while still continuing up for what's right. So, there you accept it. The complete breakdown of one of the best abominable moments in morning television history. What do you think? Did Michael handle this bearings correctly, or should he accept concluded the account sooner? Let me apperceive in the comments below.